welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel and I make travel videos here on YouTube. Thanks for joining me today. If you've watched any of my recent videos, you'll know that my dad and I took a trip to Iceland this summer and we had an amazing time. It was truly an awesome trip and I definitely want to go back to Iceland. We road tripped around the Ring Road and some other areas, and because Iceland is definitely a country where you end up driving a lot, I wanted to make a video about driving tips for Iceland. So if you plan on renting a car or a camper van, you will be fully prepared for your driving experience in Iceland. As you plan a trip to Iceland, you'll find that there's really two ways to see the country. You can either have like a base in Reykjavik and do either day tours or multi-day tours with a company that'll take you throughout Iceland, or you can rent a vehicle and drive yourself through the country. I think that's the best way to do it because then you can go everywhere you want and you can spend as much time at places that you want and don't have to stick to a certain tour schedule. And also you can obviously go further into Iceland because if you're only doing like a day trip or something, you can only go so far into the country. So I definitely recommend renting a vehicle, and trust me, driving in Iceland is really easy. Although I didn't drive at all, my dad drove, and I will kind of explain that in a minute. But I'm just gonna kind of get into all the tips right now for you. I have a pretty long list of rules and laws and just tips so you can drive safely and not break any laws. You definitely don't want to get any tickets or anything while you're over there, and you also don't want to damage your vehicle and end up having to pay for damage. So I will just kind of talk you through all of these fun little tips for you. Ready? All right, so first, just some quick basics about driving. You're gonna be driving on the right side of the road, like in the US. Manual transmissions are gonna be more readily available when you are renting. They do have automatic in the country, but you might have to pay more. So just keep that in mind. If you don't know how to drive a manual, you could maybe try to learn before you come to Iceland, or rent an automatic, but try to rent in advance so you can snag an automatic. When you drive in Iceland, you always have to have your headlights on, and that's because weather changes rapidly. So even, sorry, there's a piece of dust. So even when it's like midnight sun, like when we were there and it was light for a long time, sometimes it rained or was foggy and was pretty dark considering it was midnight sun. So you just always have to have those headlights on for safety issues. You also are not allowed to go off-roading in Iceland. You have to stick to the roads, whether it's a paved road or a gravel road. You can't just drive off into the nature because the ecosystem in Iceland is very, very delicate, and there's a lot of things that you can mess up if you drive off-road, and you just don't want to be one of those tourists that's ruining the ecosystem. I mean, come on now, stick to the road, and obviously you're not going to get stuck and stuff if you stayed on the road. Keeping with that, you also are not allowed to stop on the side of the road because there's not really much of a shoulder in Iceland, and you can't stop on the side of the road unless there's of course some major emergency that happens and you can't drive, but otherwise you can't stop on the side of the road, especially to take photos and stuff. Again, you don't want to be one of those tourists that's holding up the line because you decide to stop. Also, another tip to keep in mind is when you open the door, you have to hold on to it carefully because it can be really windy in Iceland. There's one time we were driving and it was pretty windy, but we had a pretty small camper van, like the smallest camper van you could get, so it didn't affect us majorly. But we did see a bigger mobile home completely on its side because of the wind. So definitely be cautious if you have one of those bigger vehicles. Try not to drive in the wind. And also on that note, you have to pay attention to weather alerts, whether it's summer or winter. Weather in Iceland can, like I said earlier, change rapidly, and wind, snow, rain, you definitely have to pay attention to those weather alerts. There are websites that you can go to that keep track of the weather and road closures so that you are prepared and know, you know, when not to go on a certain road, or to maybe stay back and wait until the wind or rain stops. We were there in the summer, like I said, and obviously the roads are much worse in winter. So you just have to be fully prepared and maybe do some more winter research if you plan on being there in the winter. Also, while you drive, you've really got to keep an eye out for sheep. I love the sheep in Iceland. They are super fluffy and adorable, but they do kind of walk in the road and on the side of the road a lot. So just make sure you are paying attention to that as you drive. Another thing to pay attention for are single lane bridges or sections of road. There will be a light flashing so you know it's a single lane road. Sometimes it's just a straight go and you can see the car on the other side. Sometimes it does curve, so you just have to pay attention to whether it's your turn to go or not. A lot of parking in Iceland is free, but there are certain attractions, or if you are in a city like Reykjavik where you do have to pay for parking. In Reykjavik, I suggest not even driving around, especially if you're going to be in like the downtown area. We kind of meandered through there in the car and it was really confusing. So try to park further outside of the city center and then walk into like the downtown area. It's very walkable and definitely not as car friendly. When you do pay for parking, there's usually a little kiosk that you can do and you can use your card there, or there's an app that you can use and then you'll pay for parking that way, and then you'll put a little thing in your windshield. Sometimes you pay when you leave a place, and in that case, you just park, do your stuff, and then when you leave, you'll pay. And the price is based on how long you were there. So it might be like 300 krona for 30 minutes, and then it goes up from there, or whatever the case may be. You always want to get gas when you can. So try not to go below like half a tank, just because the gas stations can be a little remote, far between, and you definitely do not want to run out of gas. So fill up when you can. I have a whole other video about gas stations in Iceland, so you can watch that. Gas stations also have restaurants, shopping, groceries, so you can kind of pick up everything you need there besides just gas. And of course, you don't want to speed, obviously, anywhere you drive. In Iceland, they do have a lot of speed cameras, especially along the ring road. So if you speed, then you're going to get charged for that. And already it's an expensive country, so you don't want an extra bill on top of everything else. You will see the speed limit signs in a circle with the speed limit, and it is in kilometers per hour. On paved roads outside of towns, it's going to be 90 kilometers per hour, which is about 55 miles per hour. On gravel roads, it's going to go down a little bit to 80 kilometers, which is 55 miles per hour. And then in towns, it's going to be 50 kilometers per hour and 30 miles per hour. The gauge on your vehicle is going to be in kilometers per hour, so you shouldn't have any trouble. You don't have to like do any calculations on the go or anything like that. And you will see signs for the town when you go into towns. So just make sure you are going the correct speed. And I feel like that's super basic knowledge. And then street signs in Iceland are really easy to understand. They're a lot like the ones in the US. The pictures pretty much explain what they mean. One that I kind of thought was a little confusing were the signs for do not enter versus no stopping / parking, and I'll show those on the screen. So the one on the right is do not enter, and then the one on the left is no stopping or parking. But otherwise, the street signs in Iceland are really easy to understand. Like I said, a lot like the US ones. Okay, now I'm going to talk about F roads real quick. These are roads that are gravel, but they aren't typical like regular gravel. They're more rocky and are only accessible by 4x4 vehicles. So if you don't have a 4-wheel drive, you cannot go on them. You will damage your car and you don't want to have to pay for that for your rental. So just pay attention. They should all be marked, and it'll just have a little F and then whatever number it is. And usually there's a sign saying, you know, gravel or you know, showing gravel, or that it's an F road. We did not have a 4x4 vehicle, so we didn't go on any F roads, although we did go on a few gravel roads that were a little iffy, but weren't F roads, so I can't even imagine what like an actual F road would be. These roads take you up into like the highlands and to more remote areas, But like I said earlier, the other roads, like the ring road, is paved. All the cities are very well maintained. So if you just stick to those roads, you're still going to be able to see a lot of attractions and have an awesome time in Iceland. The 4x4 cars and trucks do cost extra. If you want to go up into a place where it's 4x4 and you don't have the money to rent that, or just don't want to have that for the entire trip, you can always do a tour that can take you up into the Highlands or wherever. Okay, so that is it. All my quick rapid fire tips for driving in Iceland. These were just kind of like the basics and common courtesy and laws to keep track of so that you are safe and a good driver on these Iceland roads. Go ahead and leave in the comments if you have any other tips or thoughts on driving in Iceland. If you have any questions, I will try my best to answer them. And also, of course, make sure you subscribe because I will be having a few more Iceland tip videos come out in the future. And then I also have a lot more trips planned for this year in the US and in Europe. So thank you for watching today and have an awesome day wherever you are. All right, bye.